Listen up, assholes! It's time for Mr. Mustachio's top 10 manliest mustaches! That's right, fuck you! We got 'em all! That's right! We got handlebars, vroom vroom, we got con artist. Wanna buy a watch?
I should put different moustaches on. Hang on.
Anyway, the point is you can't have Fu Manchu hi-ya.
I'm about to say something polarising, extreme and controversial. This is something we've never done on the Jimquisition before, so I want to make sure you're sitting comfortably and prepared to have the shock of your stupid little life. I do not think developers need to look at explicit examples of real-life human guts hanging out and blood sprayed everywhere to make a commercial video game. I was working on a game that was going to have someone publicly hanged. I had to look up reference material of people being hung to accurately convey the physicality of the action. And after a day of watching people being hung, I was definitely affected. This was said by artist and animator Mike Jungluth in an interview from 2015, and no shit, he was affected by watching people hanging and swinging and dying off a goddamn rope all day. Jungluth said, or Youngbluth? Said he didn't feel like he was long-term negatively affected, but admitted, I pretty much just shut down emotionally, not really talking to co-workers or my wife. Violence and video games have been together since almost the very beginning. Violence is still the dominant language of gameplay, the primary way in which the majority of video game players interact with their virtual worlds. At the same time, the game industry continually, obsessively strives for realism in games to the point where the word realism itself has taken on an almost fetishistic quality. Like the word emotional, realism has been thrown around so casually it almost lacks meaning, but nonetheless developers endlessly toil to make games look and feel more real than ever before. So what happens when an industry trading predominantly in violence reaches for ever more realistic visuals? I'd have these extremely graphic dreams, very violent, an anonymous developer told Kotaku regarding their time with Mortal Kombat studio NetherRealm. I kind of just stopped wanting to go to sleep, so I'd just keep myself awake for days at a time to avoid sleeping.
Flawless victory.
NetherRealm is most famous, of course, for the Mortal Kombat series, a fighting game franchise that has always been inextricably linked to controversial violent imagery. In 1992, the blood-soaked carnage and digitized sprites of real performers caused political uproar and opened a discussion on video game violence that led to the industry self-regulating to avoid scrutiny, an act that in turn led to the formation of the ESRB. The series is noted for its over-the-top, downright cartoony approach to incredibly graphic cruelty, an approach that is often hilarious in its sheer excess. However, despite this over-the-top nature, the Mortal Kombat series is nonetheless just as obsessed as any other franchise with realism. With an increased focus on realistically splintered bone and punctured organs, Mortal Kombat requires its developers to look at some real-life horrific imagery. You'd walk around the office and one guy would be watching hangings on YouTube, another guy would be looking at pictures of murder victims, someone else would be watching a video of a cow being slaughtered. The scary part was always the point at which new people on the project got used to it, and I definitely hit that point. NetherRealm has been making its developers look at the explicitly obscene for a long time. In that 2015 article quoted earlier, there's a discussion with Mortal Kombat animator Steve Bowler. So this practice is at least 5 years old for the studio and has undoubtedly been going on a lot longer than that. The guys I always feel the worst for are the cinematic artists, because they have to make sure that, like, each bone is cracking in a realistic way. Even the audio guys probably have a bit of, like, PTSD, because they they have to spend all this time carefully picking out and putting in all these gory, juicy, crunchy, eviscerating sound effects. There's a difference in tone between the article from 2015, which only mildly brings up the PTSD aspects and presents a generally casual attitude toward the subject, and the one in 2020, which followed several years of worker well-being and mental health getting the spotlight. The latter article is more serious and presents the idea of traumatic work processes far less lightly. We see this in articles about crunch as well. Before the latter half of the 2010s, the topic of crunch was treated almost aspirationally. Would that we all could work so diligently and passionately as those coding commandos, those programming paladins, those titans of the teraflop. Fast forward after years of stories of nervous breakdowns, stress casualties, and abusive work relationships, and crunch has found itself increasingly stigmatized. With good fucking cause. An anonymous Rockstar developer, and I'm just saying Rockstar has plenty of public hangings in their games, once told me that they didn't believe crunch was so much the hours worked, but the quality of life within those hours. Crunch, he told me, is a culture. It's not a period of time, crunch is an environment. He emphasized this a lot when discussing the angry and fearful atmosphere within Rockstar's corporate structure. Untrustworthy leadership, bad attitudes, bullying, pressure, uncomfortable situations. At least for my source, these negative elements invariably accompanied crunch periods. And while I still think that excessively long work hours are physically and mentally detrimental, there can be no doubt that work environment is crucial to the worker. An unhealthy work environment means an unhealthy worker. If this is the case, then forcing developers to look at disturbing and emotionally scarring images for the sake of commercial entertainment is absolutely a crunch-related problem. In fact, NetherRealm was itself implicated in particularly abusive crunch practices last year, almost as if all of this abuse was related, almost as if these things don't happen in a bubble and there's a massive cultural problem in mainstream video game development. If nothing else, forcing, or coercively encouraging if you prefer, people to look at hangings and corpses and stabbings without the guidance of mental health experts and relevant psychological aftercare is reckless at best and downright abusive in and of itself at worst. As the Kotaku article on Mortal Kombat notes, there was no formal process, standard procedure, or guidance available from the start for anyone who might need to step back from the violent content or felt that their work was starting to negatively affect them. According to this developer, all the developer remembers was getting a verbal heads up during the hiring process when the interviewer noted that since they were working on a Mortal Kombat game, the work could be a little violent. Yeah, this is not acceptable. I don't believe they need to be looking at that kind of reference material in the first place, but to do it without a procedure in place, without safety measures and precautions, is idiotic if I'm gonna be straightforward. It's fucking moronic, and as a result, I have very little issue in blanket stating that NetherRealm is indeed run by fucking morons. Violence is something Naughty Dog loves to pretend it's criticizing and admonishing while it lovingly animates a shiv penetrating somebody's temple in all its crunching, splintering glory. The Last of Us revels in the brutality it portrays, but every now and then stops to feel sad about it. Don't get me wrong, I loved The Last of Us myself, but one can't help but roll one's eyes a little when Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann starts waxing poetic about how important it is to make all that carnage look and feel as believable as possible. We're making a game about the cycle of violence, and we're making a statement about violent actions and the impact they have on the character that's committing them and on the people close to them. And our whole approach is to say, we want to treat this as realistically as possible. When you stab someone, if you watch reference videos, which we have, it's gross and it's messy and it's not sanitized, like you see in most movies and games, and we wanted to get the player to feel that, really? You want to make your audience feel like they're actually stabbing someone? You fucking creep. Did you ever at any point stop to wonder why this kind of violence is sanitized in movies and games? Did you consider that, Neil? Because you complain about it like it's a bad thing, but maybe there's a reason? Why movies and games don't make us feel like we are actually watching and participating in murder? Look, realism in entertainment is unrealistic. There's a reason why, when someone in a movie is punched, that punch often comes with a smacking thud, and not the barely audible knocking splat that accompanies an actual fist to the face on those occasions when a noise is even made. Ow. There's a reason why, when someone is shot in a film, it's often an explosive spectacle in which blood sprays everywhere and the targets are blown across the room. Because on the big screen, actual violence, which is often quiet, understated, and unnervingly unspectacular, just doesn't look real in the exaggerated worlds of film and television. Actual, real, genuine violence is not a spectacle. It's not entertaining. The simulation of it can be, explicitly because it's not fucking real. The only reason we think frogs go ribbit is because a frog making a ribbit noise happened to be near a Hollywood recording studio when they needed a frog noise, and that became the stock sound. It's the Pacific tree frog that goes ribbit, but other frog sounds won't sound as authentic to the audience's ears because we all know frogs go ribbit. The point of this isn't just to talk about frogs, which are awesome by the way, but to highlight a truth that's as true now as it was true when the truth was first true. Media doesn't so much reflect our reality as it does shape our perception. Much of what we already associate with violence and gore isn't based in reality. It's based in decades of violent entertainment presenting violence on its own fictional terms. It's a simple, fictional portrayal. That portrayal can be explosive, exciting, nerve-wracking, funny, unsettling, glorifying, or critical, but it is very, very rarely realistic. And when it is done with realism in mind, it's usually for an important reason, not because a game studio wanted to pretend it had something important to say. I don't have a problem with violence in games, obviously. I have no issue with simulated violence. I mean, I work with pro wrestlers, but I have an innate aversion to even relatively mundane boxing matches. The former is a dramatic performance, the latter is two people actually punching each other, which is fine if you like it, but not quite for me. This is something I actually highlighted in a very, very, very old Jimquisition, pre-New 52 style reboot. In that video, which is age-gated, not on YouTube, and is probably not something I would do today, I used actual footage of Bud Dyer committing suicide to point out how real violence is genuinely disturbing. Of course, that video came with many, many warnings. I wouldn't recommend anybody watch it now because it is fucking disturbing. Because real violence is. And I used that footage back at the time to defend the video game industry from accusations of crafting murder simulators. Fictional over-the-top gore can be hilarious, as Doom Eternal demonstrates, but you don't need to look at people swinging from a line of hemp to simulate violence. There's millions of examples of portrayed violence to draw inspiration from. Portrayed violence that will serve as better reference material than genuine violence because the portrayal is what audiences know and expect. What fresh insights will an artist glean from watching a real-life hanging in 2020? Scratch that. What useful insight that will enhance the audience's enjoyment of a product be gleaned from it? Will the artist notice the way the eyes bulge and the bowels relax in a manner previously unchecked by the artists that came before? We know what things look like when they swing from a rope. We know what dead people look like. Is that not enough? It's way more than enough for the vast majority of game players who are going to be looking at in-game corpses for less than half a second. What's more, will looking at a real-life knife wound help all that much in a game where people are frozen with magic and eaten by a piranha face man? Artists should of course use reference material for certain things. I mean, if you're making a human, then knowing the human anatomy would be good, but you can look at the human body without seeing it mangled. You can look at a pair of lungs without seeing them blown apart. There's plenty of reference material for all these pieces without the need to traumatize artists. And if the artists want to look at that shit on their own terms, so be it, I guess. But it really should be their decision. And at the end of the day, most of us haven't seen a head getting smashed in real time. You can make the head collapse and the brain chunks fly as realistically as possible, or you can just render it however the fuck you want. It won't make a difference to me. It won't make a difference to most people. Sometimes the more real an element of a game is, the more unrealistic it makes everything else look. Like the fact you can be done for speeding in fucking Mafia 2, but the cops won't bat an eye if you ride on the sidewalk all day. In fact, this undermining realism is present in the Mortal Kombat series, when the game does these fancy x-rays showing you bones break, necks snap, femurs fracture, only to return to the gameplay where the character that was just physically fucking devastated is behaving like nothing happened. Like it's a Tom and Jerry cartoon. Why are you striving for realism in a fucking Tom and Jerry cartoon? No one wants to see a cat legitimately flattened by an anvil. One element of realism only highlights how fake the other shit is. That's a problem with the game industry overall. It focuses on a handful of things, perfecting and polishing only one or two aspects of a video game while the rest of it flounders. The gore is gory enough, video game industry, and your efforts to gore harder are doomed to remain unrealistic because that's what realism is. You don't need to make it much gorier. You've done it, video games. You've already won that pony. You've shattered bone about as much as it's gonna shatter, mashed brains as well as they're gonna mash. You don't need to keep doing this to your developers. At this point, the game industry is honing a craft it's got pretty much nailed. While it still can't make two characters fuck without them resembling a pair of action men slapping their shiny plastic groins together, maybe deal with that, game industry. Maybe work on stuff you're actually really fucking dragging behind on, rather than practicing the shit you already know how to do. Make video games do fucks better. With all this in mind, a studio egging its employees on as they view images of wrecked cadavers comes off as luridly voyeuristic in its lack of genuine necessity, something being done to give studio reps something mildly risque to brag about, something that, in true video game industry form, takes on the appearance of maturity while being anything but. As mentioned earlier, NetherRealm and Naughty Dog have prior when it comes to worker abuse. Both studios are alleged to have dangerously excessive crunch practices, with staff working long hours and suffering physical and mental harm as a result. On top of that, artists and animators are spending all that time recreating intestinal tracts and cranial fragments, often spending days on just one little bit of a blown off limb. Simply working on the simulated stuff that long can have detrimental or at least desensitizing effects. Dumping actual photos of violence victims on the desks of these people? You might as well just toss a lit match at Keith Richards. If my rockstar friend is correct and crunch is indeed cultural and atmospheric more than chronological, then it's most fitting that two companies notoriously embracing of crunch are also places where artists and animators are routinely disturbed by nightmare-inducing imagery. We've talked a lot about how the end product isn't so damaging as people make it out to be, and I tend to agree with that, claims the anonymous Mortal Kombat developer quoted earlier. But I think the process of making these things can be harmful for people. It can cause them to burn out or lose a sense of self sometimes. I would hope that something, at least, that developers can do with their co-workers is just start talking to each other about these things. If we're not solving things, at least having supportive people around, I think, is really crucial. And if there's one thing we've been learning about the game industry, the leaders of that industry are not where people will find the support they need. It's the first day of Pride Month. How exciting! So, today is a good day to just reiterate that your old pal Jim Sterling is queer as fucking hell, and being that is pretty good. What else? Trans rights, obviously. Black Lives Matter, more than ever right now, that's an important thing to reiterate. Fascism smells of poo, the police should stop rioting, TERFs eat shit, Jeff Bezos owes me $1 million, and Death Stranding wasn't very good. So I think that's everything I need to get off my chest for Pride Month. And remember, stay gay, stay safe. Did that go on good?
Yeah.
Your face lit up.
Went on great.
What development studios need to sit back and reflect on is this. It's something I intimated earlier in the video. Do you really want to make your audience feel like they're actually murdering someone to death with murder? It's funny, I've been covering games for quite a while now, and I remember in the 2000s, the video game industry was up in arms about how the press would characterise their video games as murder simulators. And then, here we have Neil Druckmann saying, well, what we really want to do is simulate the feeling of murder. And honestly, I don't think that's what people want to see. I didn't enjoy Peter Jackson's Brain Dead because it had realistic violence. I liked it because a set of intestines were alive and they used lungs for feet and it farted and it was good. Brain Dead is a very good film and it is incredibly violent, but part of what makes it work is that the violence is so unrealistic, so over the top, so ludicrous, so full of kung fu priests that it's fine. Because people don't want to see an actual head caved in and call it entertainment. Most of us grew out of that phase where we'd look up rotten.com and say, oh look, his head's been blown up. Most of us grew up. And those of us who especially grew up to be very, very cool adults, those people, thank God for me.